How do we go back? Beautiful. Aside to the sterile introduction, my name is Sally. I'm one of 6 kids. I was born in Derby of Western Australia, and I'm proud to be here today to have this conversation with you guys. So 7 years ago, I joined the workforce, and when I joined the workforce, I joined it with a small pizza business. And as soon as I joined the workforce, I quickly fell in love with the idea of learning something new during every shift. So much so that the business owner would get really, really frustrated at me, and he'd come over to me and he'd be like, Sally, can you just go back over there and just stand at your station and just wait for the phone to ring? And I didn't understand this at all. So really confused but compliant, I'd walk back over, I'd stand there and I'd just impatiently wait for the phone to ring. I didn't understand the lack of appreciation for productivity and the way I wanted to work. In a world of instant gratification, I've never had a 10-year career plan, let alone a 5-year plan when I get asked the age-old question of where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'm easily inspired, I'm quick to change my mind. Job security has never been a major consideration for me within the scope of my career. Because of technology being the central nervous system of the global economy, I feel like I'm connected to the world at large via an instant message. And I'm informed very, very quickly, and as such, I'm generally not victim to confirmation bias to the extent of my elders. My mindset, which is that mindset, is forecast to represent circa 75% of the global workforce by 2025. Some people get really excited about this idea. Some people get very nervous. So in April last year, I was invited to do my first ever keynote presentation for the Australian Arab Business Council at one of their monthly dinners. And they invited me to come and talk on the topic of personal branding, given that's sort of where some of my expertise sit, and it was to 200 well-established business professionals who operate in mature industries like accounting and construction. So as I was preparing for this keynote, I thought, I might think so differently to these people and I might make a fool of myself if I just walk in there and start talking about personal branding without first addressing the need for a major shift in business mindset to occur. So this major shift in business mindset that is required is subject to the fact that personal branding is brought to life in today's economic landscape by the fact that humanness is becoming an economic priority across the globe, and we're seeing this in changes throughout the workforce. And this major shift in business mindset isn't just required by that particular subset of 200 people that I presented to, but it's instead required by leaders and business practitioners across the globe. So a lot of us know that changes need to be made in terms of how we're approaching business, and often a lot of people say, oh, knowledge is power, but I'd suggest that instead knowledge and understanding are only potential, because we all know that action is actually the catalyst to change. For example, a lot of us believe in climate change, but we leave all the lights on. So what will we do? This is the major question. What will we do as individuals, enterprises, government bodies, industry, and education to drive positive social and economic change amid all of these changes that are occurring and the mind shift change that we need to action in our businesses? How will we bridge the mindset gap between, I suppose, our aging workforce and aging leadership, particularly with the rise of millennials in the workforce? It's interesting because, and I think the prior panel touched on it really interestingly with some different perspectives, but we're all fearful because of what we see, that there's this major robot apocalypse that's just going to happen because of technological advancements. And of course, we live in an economic environment that is very different to what it was years ago. But it's interesting, if you look at 1950 census data from the US at that time, there were 250 formally acknowledged occupations. Only one of those occupations has been completely eliminated from the global workforce today. So we are fearful, again, with the whole robot apocalypse notion, that redundancies for occupations are going to happen across the globe at a mass scale and in quick succession due to the rise in augmented reality and artificial intelligence. And this is bound to happen to some extent, but I think we tend to over-catastrophize the idea because we don't just think about it practically. So what we need to do is understand in our individual capacities, in the professions we operate in and the groups we contribute to, what is our responsibility when it comes to the process whereby we determine, we identify, and then innovate where tasks should become augmented, where they should become automated, and potentially where they will be made redundant? So over the course of time, as we're seeing all these technological advancements, what's happening is it's actually building a very interesting, I suppose, complementary and interdependent relationship between human and technology. And that's very helpful for us in terms of achieving economic growth across the globe. So for example, if you consider technological applications, in order for them to increase in importance when it comes to the economic contributions they can facilitate with, the human must let go of particular tasks. And then conversely, for the human to strengthen the way they contribute to the economy and their professional capacity, they have to embrace technological applications. So in that respect, there's this really interdependent relationship whereby we can't, I suppose, effectively just welcome technology without first the human embracing that technological application. So as leaders, for example, how will we contribute to the process in which we use technology to, one, improve, and then two, repurpose the way we deploy human capital across the globe? How will we as leaders nurture environments and innovative ecosystems that will facilitate the growing relationship between human and between technology? Because this is another important piece of the puzzle whereby I think we easily just adopt all of these technologies into our workplaces. But if we don't effectively manage that change process and how we incorporate those technologies into our companies, into our workforces, then what happens is we often don't get the results that we actually want. So I think one of the key questions with this piece of the puzzle is how will leadership, one, attract, two, retrain, and then three, retain the human capital that is required for them in the process of becoming future ready? Because what happens is when there's mismanagement between applying and adopting technologies into the workplace, if we don't manage that process effectively, often what happens is we see it work to the detriment of our human workforce. So as leaders, we need to be making decisions today that are considerate to the future landscape. In 2013, I was completing year 12 and I was in a business studies class, and it was really interesting. So the teacher was taking us through the process of assessing a profit and loss statement to understand the financial circumstance of a business in that respect. And as we got to the end of the session, I felt sort of shortchanged because the teacher hadn't thoroughly explored what we should do if we find ourselves in the unfortunate circumstance of running at a net loss. And given, I suppose, economic statistics and whatnot surrounding business failure, particularly in today's landscape, I knew this was a relevant conversation for us to be having. So as we got to the end of the session, I sort of quietly, nervously, but curiously raised my hand and I asked the teacher, I said, so what do we do if we're running at a loss? Unbeknownst to that teacher at that time, I was part-time managing a corporately owned pizza business that was running at a net loss of circa $6,000 per week. So when he just responded and said, oh, assess your costs, and then just quickly moved on from the conversation, I knew in that moment that that business studies class wasn't equipping me with the knowledge or the thinking that I needed to actually address a real economic issue. So I suppose the question then becomes, what will both the public and the private sectors do to collaborate effectively to ensure that we bridge the gap between education and the economic realities that are actually occurring? The other important piece of the puzzle is with finite capital, how will both the public and private sectors approach their investment strategies to ensure that they're investing in the right areas? I think the best starting point is that we need to rewire the thinking of educational leadership to overcome all of the legacy issues that exist in our education systems today. And another important piece of the puzzle is how will we nurture change agent and trust cultures amid all of the anxiety that is brought on by change for people? I think overall it's a lack of forward thinking at leadership, particularly with governments at the helm, that causes a lot of economic uncertainty for people when it comes to this growing relationship between human and technology, and particularly, as the prior panel touched on, as innovation continues to outpace regulation. In a world of growing personalisation, leaders need to be thinking how they're going to connect their commercial goals to the wants and needs of their workforce, and they also need to be thinking about how they're going to adapt workplace environments and their workforces to cater to the growing hunger for flexibility. And I'm running very short for time. So several weeks ago, I was in an Uber travelling to the airport, and the Uber driver said to me, if you told me 30 years ago that my boss would be my phone and I could just turn it on and off when I wanted to, I wouldn't have believed you. So a lot of how we see the workforce, how we see workplaces is changing, and in that respect, leaders need to let go of the comfort, let go of the confirmation bias based on how we've always done things, to make room for change and embracing change so as to ensure that we remain relevant and competitive. So whilst a lot is changing, what will forever remain constant is the human desire to do meaningful work. Every single human being will forever want to contribute, be recognised and be rewarded. That will never change. So I think with that, the most important question then becomes not necessarily what will we do, which I think is where most of the focus is at the moment, but how will we do it in our capacities as leaders. So with that, I will invite